right, welcome back to another episode of A Walk Through the Ages. This week we will be covering chapters 25, 26, and 27. We're so glad you're back with us, and we'll start out with introductions. We'll start over here with this good-looking young man.
Well, I was hoping you introduce yourself first, and then I'll play off yours.
Okay, I'm Pete Mitchell.
I'm Goose.
And I'm Maria Campbell.
And I'm Callie Lopez.
Well, we got a lot to go over, guys. It's really good chapters. But before we do, let's start with a word of prayer. I'm going to give it to Callie for a word of prayer.
That sounds good. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this time that we get to come together and to discuss your word and to talk about patriarchs and prophets. And Father, I just pray that you bless us with the Holy Spirit and that everything that we say gives you glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, let's do just one sentence recap. Where we left off last week was they had just done the Passover. So the first chapter 25 here is the Exodus. So I'm going to try to guide the discussion, but I guess I'll go ahead and start. The only thing that stuck out to me was, well, actually a lot, but one thing I noticed is, before, it says here, before the morning even broke, they were on their way. So the whole, spirit going through the camp and slaying the firstborn had just happened. Trying to picture the imagery here, it's a pretty climactic event had just occurred, right? Mm-hmm. And so they've been instructed that they were going to be leaving, so they're ready, right? They got their shoes on. It's not like they're like, oh, what just happened? Mm-hmm. They're ready. And
it says they are assembled themselves in Goshen like an army. They are ready to go at the commander's word.
Yeah, but this isn't like going on a camping trip like a couple cars heading out of town. This is
it's
about 600,000 on foot that were men beside children. That's just men, right? So let's talk about their wives, their daughters, their sons, their children. And on top of that, their herds, their goats, their cattle.
And on top of that, a mixed multitude also went with them.
Yes, and that's what that really struck out to me is the mixed multitude part. And one thing I want to read here real quick, just to make sure I don't mischaracterize it, is that in this multitude were not only those who were actuated by faith in the God of Israel, but also a far greater number who desired only to escape from the plagues, or who followed in the wake of the moving multitudes merely from excitement and curiosity. This class were ever a hindrance and a snare to Israel. As if we recall, the last group they spoke about at the very end, that God was so merciful that deliverance was not just for the nation of Israel. Right. It's like anybody who wanted to go. Just come on over, right? They knew they had to go stay at the household of one of the Hebrews to be covered by the blood on the doorpost. And but here we see that, here's the thing, we don't always know everybody's motives. And it's hard to know, but a lot of these people were, don't get me wrong, they were sincere, but a lot of them were also just doing it for the excitement or to escape the bad side of it, right?
Yeah, just think of, if there's some excitement going on.
Oh, yeah.
There's a parade, there's something going on in life. There are always those, people are always there just to see how this is going to end, or just to see what's happening, or they're just caught up in the moment and they're just going along, just for the ride kind of a deal. It's just like you see a big accident and all those rubbernecking people looking around. This kind of was a similar situation with, there were not only Israelites, it was other people who were scared. I would be scared if I wasn't an Israelite and all these things were happening, all these plagues. I'd be like, oh, something serious is happening. I gotta get out of Dodge. Just so if somebody's leaving, I'm gonna probably go with them.
I'm gonna hitch my wagon to them.
Well,
you're right.
Seeing true manifestations of God, taking place. So I want to be with them.
I'd be like, I'm following them. I'm with them.
Yeah.
It created a lot of what we call fair weather fans, right? It's funny. Like the week after the Super Bowl, all these people who I had no idea were Tampa Bay fans are suddenly proclaimed to be Tampa Bay fans, right?
Yeah, I got my hat too.
Yeah, you got yours. Everybody rushing to the store to get that Tampa Bay shirt on. But you're right, it creates a bunch of people just reacting out of emotion.
But when you react out of emotion, kind of like these people were, it talked about this class was ever a hindrance and a snare to Israel.
And we'll see that reading further down the down the road into the further chapters, we'll see examples
have you ever
of
been
that.
part of a group, like of friends, like when you're in high school or something like that, and you have a good group of friends and you guys are great, but then somebody invited somebody outside the group, and things don't always turn out the way that you thought they would turn out?
You always hear, who invited that guy? Yeah.
It's kind of how it's going to go.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now, just a little bit past that, because it was talking about, I thought it was really fascinating, the people took also with them flocks and herds, even very much cattle, because why? These were the property of the Israelites who had never sold their possessions to the king as the Egyptians, going back to Joseph during the famine.
You're right.
So God's even giving them back what was theirs.
Right. And they never paid taxes to Egypt either, I believe it said. But you're right, they kind of had a deal with when Joseph was there, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but it says, they went forth with the spoil of their oppressors.
Yeah.
And something in one of the chapters had got me where, they were told to go borrow stuff, to go get stuff from their neighbors, to take with them, that kind of deal they were supposed. So I guess this was some of the stuff. I mean, they were there building that economy.
Yeah. It's like, what do you do?
They didn't get anything from it.
Right.
It's pitch dark night. A huge climactic event of the first slaying of the firstborn just happened. You knock, knock. Hey, you gonna borrow those gold earrings? Can I borrow those? Like,
Right, because it wasn't like, can I borrow a pot and pan?
No,
Can I
it
take
was
the best
value.
stuff?
Yes, stuff of value.
It's valuable stuff.
It's like, hey, you guys labored, you toiled all these years, you built this awesome economy, you got nothing for it. Get something and to go with you. So, I find that interesting that, they were supposed to get something of value, the spoil.
That's a strange word, borrow, right?
I guess they're asking, they didn't go and take it behind their backs or anything, they borrowed it.
It's not coming back.
Yeah.
It's not coming back.
But it says because of the fear in them, they just, here, take it. Just
did.
be gone. Be gone,
Well, I mean, when of all the plagues, they had seen the buildup. They were like, yeah, you can, whatever you want, come and just take it.
Take
Like,
it, go.
leave. Exactly.
I think they knew that there's no doubt they're dealing with the true God.
Yes.
Before he causes us even more damage, just please go, take it and go.
Take it and go.
But I like how Maria said it, they had, because of their work, they had all those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so they were really just getting back what was actually theirs.
Yes.
Right.
Payment for the hard
Hard
work
work.
and the years that they had endured.
True. Very true. One thing, I don't want to skip too far ahead, so if you guys want to keep on it and just let me know, but I did notice that they also took Joseph's bones.
Because he had asked that. That was something that they had promised him. And, I like that because I'm a strong believer that my word is something that's very important to me. And if I give you my word, if I have to walk through the snow to fulfill it, I'm going to do that.
Right.
A while ago I left here, I pulled in my garage and Pastor called me.
Yeah.
And I said, I'll be back. Because I have children who I tell, if you start something, you need to finish it.
Right.
And if you tell somebody you're going to do something, you need to do it.
Ooh, and Maria is perfect
it's
because
important.
exactly what happened with Abraham, right? God said, this is what's going to happen, and your people are going to go in there, but I'm going to bring him back. He's a man of his word, kind of like Maria's a woman of her word. And it was the same day.
Right. Exactly
It was
400 years. Wasn't
exactly
it?
on the boom, right then. It's happening.
God is a
450.
precise God.
Yes. A man of his word.
450?
400.
400
years.
Yeah.
Yes. But even in this leading out, there is just something that, you said, we can't see the future. God sees what's going to happen later on.
Yes.
And the way he led them,
I like how you're going.
He didn't take them through the easiest path. He knew that they were depressed, that their self-worth wasn't there. They weren't ready for battle to...
Yes.
So he bring them through the area that they wouldn't have to be facing a battle immediately.
Immediately,
They got sandals on. I was like, what they're going to do? Throw a chicken or a goat at the Philistines? Like, he knew they weren't ready. And
He knew they weren't ready.
He knew physically, and he also knew emotionally and spiritually they weren't ready.
They weren't ready.
Exactly.
No, I mean, come on, 400 years
Yeah.
in slavery.
Yeah.
I mean, even your self-esteem. I mean, you're treated badly for all that time. The psychological effects of that. I mean, physically, they probably weren't properly fed. They probably were weak as
It says,
You know?
yeah, it says he knew that they had little knowledge of God. In other words, they had knowledge of God, but it was weak, right? Because of all those 400 years
Yeah.
of slavery.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he knew that if I take them straight to battle and to war, they're going to be disheartened.
They're going to lose. They're not ready.
Yeah.
They would just retreat, right? Like you're saying, they
Yeah.
would just
They
bring
would've
back.
yeah.
Yeah.
I see here, the one pivotal line here to go back to that is that in leading them by the way of the Red Sea, the Lord revealed himself as a God of compassion as well as of judgment. So yeah, it was a compassionate move.
Yeah.
He knew what they needed. He knew what they needed for sure.
And isn't it interesting too, because isn't it the fact also for the Philistines that in that area, it wasn't their time yet either?
Yeah, the cup of their iniquity hadn't filled yet.
Right.
Yeah, I
So
mean, God is all-knowing. We forget that.
Yeah.
He's fair to
And he's fair.
everyone.
Yeah.
Yes.
But and then going into once the Exodus, now we talk about this pillar. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys, I don't know. Could you imagine seeing a pillar of cloud, and also at times it was spread over like a canopy to. Again, you see when I see and read this, I think more examples of God being a God of compassion. I mean, protecting them from the hot sun of the
Yeah.
desert.
And
also
leading them.
Yeah, leading
You know,
them.
leading them.
And also a pillar of fire by
By
night.
to warm and to, because, you know, I'm sure in the desert, you know, those temperatures are going to drop in the nighttime.
Could you imagine little Luke out in the wilderness? He's afraid of the dark, but he's got a nightlight.
Yeah, a big one.
I mean,
A big one.
right. It's like any parent would do.
Right.
Any parent would do. You have a baby, you shield them from the sun because
Yes.
you don't want them to burn. And if they're cold, you wrap them in blankets to keep them warm. And I love that also because in 24-hour span, it was for the reason that they could constantly be assured of his divine presence
Right.
all day long.
Like, how awesome is God? I mean, he's shown them his manifestation of himself through the plagues, and then through the Passover, and then still a pillar of fire, pillar of cloud. And he's just continually manifesting himself to his people.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of like that building of that relationship. These
Sure.
are just gently.
Yeah, you just don't go on one date, right? When you try
Right.
to get to know somebody, you gotta you gotta keep presenting yourself and get to know people, just like he's manifesting himself to the nation of Israel.
Yeah.
But then, ladies and gentlemen, it takes a funny turn. He kind of leads them to like a rough spot with the ocean on one side, or the Red Sea on one side, and a big old wall of
Mountain.
mountains
Yeah,
on this side. Almost like a dead end here, right?
Yeah.
And so this is a weird predicament. It says here that Moses is told that, hey, Pharaoh's coming back. you know.
Moses has got a heads up.
Yeah, I know. But let me hear, one thing you got something you want to
Oh
go to?
man, I was just, if you don't, before you head on to the
I
Red
do.
Sea.
I do. Before we get to
Egypt,
Red Sea.
are you gonna go to
yes,
that
yes,
in
yes.
Egypt? Okay, go
Yes,
ahead.
because this is to me, it burned in my heart when I read it, and I want to, I hope to hit my mic too hard there, but I really want to make a big emphasis here. It says, so as they're traveling, leaving, Egypt's back home stewing over what just happened.
yeah.
right?
Yes.
And it says here, in Egypt, the report was spread that the children of Israel, instead of tarrying to worship in the desert, were pressing on toward the Red Sea. And basically what I want to get at here is that they're festering over it. It says the people deplore their folly in attributing the death of the firstborn to the power of God. Their great men, recovering from their fears, accounted to the plagues as a result of natural causes. And this struck out to me. Why we got to hear this, and it's got to stick in our minds. Not just this chapter, but in previous chapters, like for example, the flood. We have a constant theme where Lucifer, Satan, he has a tendency of things that should be giving glory to God are misdirected away from God, and things that are not of God are directed and blamed on God. And here's exactly what's happening once again.
Yeah.
You know, God just performed these things by his mighty hand. And yet they're trying to brush it off. Oh, no, these are natural disasters.
Yeah. Didn't
Natural
happen.
causes,
He
right?
didn't do this.
And
No.
so it's a slander on God once again,
Yeah.
right? Either to take away credit to him or to give credit to him that's not due to him.
Yeah, it just showed how hard these people had become. That they just refused, like, you know.
Believed.
Yeah.
To give any credit.
And then also, it says here, Egypt's so far gone that they're prideful even in defeat, even in their loss.
Yes.
They're like, what are the other nations going to think of us that we just lost the Israelites, right? We just lost the Israelites. If we don't go get them with all of our army, they're going to laugh at us. And they're more worried about how they look rather than what God thinks of them.
True.
And that to me stuck out. I was like, wow, talk about pride. This is pride on another level.
Even after all 10 plagues.
After all,
I
and your
know.
firstborn,
Yeah.
were slaves.
You're-
Yeah. And so here they come.
Here they come.
That's right. And are you going to continue on? Are you going
Go
to
ahead,
continue
go
the
ahead.
journey?
Go ahead.
Because all I was thinking was the fact that, it moved on to talk about that they're in retrospect of all the children of Israel in this position they are, there really was no way out.
There wasn't.
There was no, it said, true, there was no possibility of deliverance unless God himself should interpose for their release. I mean, they are in a rock and a hard place moment. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
What's
yes.
awesome about God, there's no mistakes
Yes.
when it comes to God. He did this for a reason.
Yeah.
He did this for a reason. I mean, this was, I mean, I love it when, Moses said, stand still, and see the salvation of the Lord. He's going to save you,
Yes. Yes.
He's going to save you, but you guys just got to wait.
But I love Moses' reaction here. So they're starting to murmur, like, which I get it. We're in a dead end. They're going to come kill us. We see the armies. We see their shining chariots approaching.
Yeah.
But Moses, he stands firm. It's like, we have been brought here. I'm paraphrasing here. I guess I could read it. He says, I guess, how can they charge upon him the dangers and difficulties of their situation when he had followed the express command of God? ? True, there was no possibility of deliverance unless God himself should interpose for their release. But having been brought into this position in obedience to the divine direction, Moses felt no fear of the consequences. In other words, I've done what God has asked me to.
Yes.
He's got a clear conscience here.
Yeah. But can you imagine that scene, that confusion, that fear? There was a part here that actually said more of them went to Moses than prayed. I mean, it's like they're still putting their trust in man, even though he was a man of God. But you would think that having been delivered, having gone through the plagues, having been here, you were led here by this cloud. It's not like there was any mistake of maybe we took a false turn.
Right.
You were led here. You should have known that God's got this. He's just waiting to show out. He's just waiting, to show you how awesome he is.
For real.
And here you are running around like chickens without heads, going to Moses, crying, some are praying, and I just love it when Moses just said, chill.
Yes.
Stand still.
He did.
He did. He really did. And what's so sad about that, like you're talking, it went on to talk about the cloud that has been their protector, their nurturer, their leader. Now they're looking at it as a sign of something bad.
A calamity.
Of calamity.
Yes.
You go, what's happening, guys? That's why Moses had to been standing there like, what is happening? Like, everybody breathe.
This is a point, like, if we're dating and I've been good to you and you think I'm a psycho, it's like, maybe this chick isn't the right one for me. But yet God is so merciful and long-suffering, right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
For
But you're
sure.
right. It's something that they could have, it's been a sign but of God's power, yet they're thinking it's calamity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It was, when I read that, I was like, what is happening?
Yeah, they
Hold
said,
the phone. This cloud just delivered you. Here, Bert, so
Well,
you know where we're at.
I know where we're at.
Oh.
I got it right here.
Okay, good.
No, I'm just, you guys are saying all the right stuff. There's no need for me to say nothing.
hey, we don't want Goose being a side character.
That's right.
Hey, I'm whenever you need help, buddy, that's why I'm here.
Chime in whenever.
No, I was just going to say that this is where Moses starts being the focal point of everybody's blame.
Yes.
Like, you took us out of Egypt. Your fault. You fix it.
It's a whipping post.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
And eventually he's going to cave. But, he holds strong for a long, long time.
Yes.
Yeah. So we got to hurry up real quick. Sorry to keep.
Oh.
We'll put the gas real quick. We don't have to flip forward yet, but real quick. So what happens next is the parting of the Red Sea, right?
yeah.
And then they go forward.
Right.
Go ahead.
And how symbolic, because he's like, God, like we're talking about, he's going to turn, he's going to, these people you see right now, you'll never
They'll
see
be
them
gone.
again.
Right.
Forever.
Right.
And like, it's going to talk about the typology of the fact that like, this is exactly what will happen at the end. We could turn and say, you won't have to see these people. Sin will not be no more forever.
Yeah.
We can go forward.
But just, the amazing fact of being able to walk through the sea and you're looking around you And that's
I know,
that's
really
amazing in
I know,
itself.
and it
Just
says
you can't
up on
even
dry
imagine.
land.
Yeah.
Right. It
Yeah.
wasn't,
It
out
wasn't-
there it's soggy and there's a
Yeah.
little snow. We're talking about an
Dry
ocean
land.
floor,
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
and it was dry.
And you're
I mean-
walking through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And who, hundreds of feet.
I know.
All right.
Can you imagine those little kids?
Yeah.
I know. I was about to say,
Right.
if I was a kid, I would take my finger and like, you know what I mean? How you do like,
Yeah.
to skim it.
Oh, sure.
Just the wonder and the majesty of that
Yeah.
miracle. I mean, you know.
Yes.
I mean, one after the other, right? It's like, man.
And then it says, morning comes, right? And God brings down the walls. And then they see just strewn on the shores, just bodies and bodies of the Egyptian army.
Yes.
Yeah. And then, of course, they sing the Song of Moses, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Singing and the tambourine and all those
Yep.
wonderful things. That would have been a high moment, though, you
I
know,
mean,
getting
yeah.
through that,
Yeah.
then seeing all your enemies destroyed. I
know.
mean,
I mean, when you saw the waters part, it said, then hope returned to their hearts of Israel. When you would have saw that, it would have been like, hey, what, like,
Yeah.
I mean, it
Yeah.
would have been hard not to, whoever's in the front would have probably started, just running through. And then, but this is such an important lesson for his church and us individually of going forward.
Yes.
Yes.
I was
Yes.
about to say that,
Yes.
when Moses said, okay, God has provided deliverance, start walking towards that shore. They did have to take
Yeah.
an action of
Yeah.
faith.
yeah,
right?
because if the first people at the front of the line didn't start moving,
Yes.
the ones at the back couldn't move.
Yeah.
We're talking about maybe,
Yeah.
a million?
Oh, at least, yeah.
At least,
Yes.
Yeah.
you know? So
Yeah.
can you imagine the people on the millionth row in the back? I mean, the
Yeah.
ones in the front had to go forward in order for the others
Yes.
to get through. So going forward, it's important. We can't be stagnant. You can't be standing there
Yeah.
stuck in your own rut. You have to move forward. Whatever it is you're going through, move forward with God.
Yes.
To,
Yes.
to me, real quick, if I may, that last paragraph of chapter 25 was the crowning point to me. It says, the cloud that was a wall of darkness to the Egyptians was to the Hebrews a great flood of light, illuminating the whole camp and shedding brightness upon the path before them. So the dealings of providence bring to the unbelieving darkness and despair, while to the trusting soul they are full of light and peace. The path where God leads the way may lie through the desert or the sea, but it is a safe
A
path.
safe path.
Man, isn't that so true today?
Yes.
There, you can talk to people, people that follow the Lord, they love them, or they love Him, and they follow Him. It is a light to them. But to the people that have no want, it is darkness.
Yeah.
Yeah. And a safe path.
Yes.
If God is leading, it's a safe path.
That's right.
Rest assured, don't doubt,
Right.
just go forward.
Yeah, because just prior to that, it talked about the fact that if you wait till everything is out of the way
You
to
know it.
obey, you'll never go forward.
Right. Good point. Very
Yeah.
good point.
And so,
Unfortunately, we have to cut that
I know,
short.
you're-
I know we got to cut because But yes, very good point. All valid points. And
Yeah.
it's, again, these chapters are just cram-packed with good
I
stuff.
know.
they are.
So chapter 26 now, it's from the Red Sea over to Sinai. Now, let me start off by saying, again, they've lived through so much, stuff that one person could never forget in their lives. But yet,
I know.
they're so quick to forget.
I know. 3 days later.
3 days later.
Yeah.
3 days later.
Yes.
Now, at the same time, after saying that,
Yes.
I got to stop and say, but I'm no better. I got to be honest here. How many times do we have victories in our life and when God has interposed and stood up and answered the call when we needed Him? And we remember that for a season,
Yes.
and then the next battle comes and we seem to
Don't
forget
forget Him.
the prior
Our faith
victory.
is all
Yeah. So we do love to hear from the pulpit, oh, no, ancient Israel, how could they have had such weak faith? But we're no different,
No.
Different, yeah.
So here we have Sinai.
Yeah.
And
On the journey to Sinai.
It had only been a month. So it said in the bottom of page 177 to the right, it said, when they had been a month absent from Egypt, they made their first encampment in the wilderness. It's only been a month.
Yeah. And then 3 days they had been with no water, and then it starts this murmuring, right?
Right.
It starts the story
And then
right
they end
here.
up with that bitter water, and
Yeah.
and God worked a miracle right there.
Did.
All He did was put some tree limb in there, and boom.
Now, somebody correct me, was it this side of the Red Sea or the prior side of the Red Sea where they start even like saying, Moses, did you bring us out here to kill us and steal all our goods? And
It started on before you got
Before?
to the Red Sea.
Okay.
Yeah. And it just continued.
I know, I remember reading it somewhere. But yeah,
Yeah.
they-
Yeah.
It didn't take long.
yeah.
It didn't take long.
No.
It's a funny bunch he's in charge of here, right?
I know.
What is it that Moses is the most meek man that ever lived, or something
Yeah.
like it?
I
Is that
believe
what
that.
he's known as meek? And you go, yeah.
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 deal
When
with
you
these
start
people.
reading
To
it.
deal with a million mumbling,
Oh,
forgetful people.
Always accusing
I have
you?
3 in my household, and if that starts happening, my patience is thin, right? So can you imagine?
That's true. That's just 3, right? Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
you-
But it talked about how it was necessary for them to encounter difficulty. This whole month they had not had privation. They had water, they had
Yeah.
food, they had all those things up to this month.
It's like going camping
Yes.
until your food runs out, right? Because
Yes.
they've taken some provisions with them.
Yes, it is.
But the whole point of the Lord permitted difficulties to surround them and their supply of food to be cut short, that their hearts may turn to Him who had hitherto been their deliverer. The point was so that He could draw them to Him.
And not just that, you're absolutely right. He wants them to realize, not just even Moses, look to me.
Yes.
Yeah, very good point.
I underlined several times on 178 on the second column, they forgot. They forgot. It was like 4 times, it was like 5 times, excuse me, they forgot. And it ended with the fact of how they talked of the hardness of the way. And I thought, that really struck me personally, because how many of us focus on the hardness of the Christian life, the hardness of the way? And God says that's not the focus. We know that to be, you're supposed to think of the good of God, not the hardness of your way.
It's almost a slap in God's face. You'd rather be a slave than endure a little hardship along the way
Right.
With freedom.
with
Yeah.
freedom. Right.
But once again, as Christians, a lot of them think there will be no hardness
Yeah.
along the way.
They're sold a false bill of goods there, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they're to prove your faith, to build your faith. If we would focus on that instead of thinking of the hardness of the way, it would change the perspective. And they needed a
Definitely.
change.
But you see, these people were slaves for years, So they need a whole shift in their
Yes.
perspective.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
They need to build that confidence again in God. They need to get back to Him, to trust Him again fully. So making it easy where you just take them out and put them in a lap of luxury and
Yes.
it's just, cool sailing. I don't think that would have gotten them or
Character.
even us back. It wouldn't
Right.
build any fortitude.
You're right.
So that, when things get tough, you still trust Him regardless of what is happening. Your life gets tough, you trust Him.
Oh, beautifully
regardless.
said, Maria. Beautifully said, because
Yeah.
the whole point, for years we've been in bondage, slaves to sin. And when we decide to come out of that, there has to be a paradigm shift. There has to be something inside of us that happens to learn to trust Him, because most of us don't know Him. And so there has to be a nurturing along the way, because if He would have taken us through the land of the Philistines, we would have given up, right?
Right.
And in our Christian walks, if it would be hard immediately, we would give up. But God knows, and when hard times come, like you said, to build character and also to get us to know Him and trust Him, so that when harder and harder things come, we will go to Him.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
I liked how you said that.
Right. In other words, He didn't bring them out of Egypt on a paved highway. It wasn't.
What?
Was
No.
Yeah.
It wasn't a paved highway, is what we're saying. But yeah, I like how it says here, the history of the wilderness life of Israel was chronicled for the benefit of the Israel of God to the close of time.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very true, right?
Yep. Those are the hard times.
Yeah, it says here real quickly, I think this little short sentence paraphrases what we've just said. It says, many look back to the Israelites and marvel at their unbelief and murmuring, feeling that they themselves would not have been so ungrateful. But when their faith is tested, even by little trials, they manifest no more faith or patience than did ancient Israel. When brought into straight places, they murmur at the process by which God has chosen to purify them.
Isn't it funny? They asked to be saved, and then they were complaining about when they're being saved.
Yeah.
We do the same thing.
Yeah.
God, I'm praying for this, and then it comes, I'm like, I don't want it
I
like
don't
this.
think I want it again. I changed my mind. That's not how I envisioned it.
Yeah.
Seriously. On that, I thought on page 179, on the left column, it says, do we well to be thus unbelieving? Why should we be ungrateful and distrustful? Jesus is our friend. All heaven is interested in our welfare, and our anxiety and fear grieve the Holy Spirit of God. And I thought, wow, that was a cutting to myself for sure.
Right.
You know, it's just like having children. I have a teenager at the house, and there's certain things I'll tell her, you know, no, we're not allowing this, we're not allowing that. And she just thinks we're the worst people in the
Yes.
whole wide world, you know, because, you know, her friends are doing it and stuff. And I always look at her and I said, as a parent, I have only your best interest. I said, I want nothing that's not good for you. So anything that I'm keeping from you, I don't believe it's good for you. And I just want you to remember that. In all your rebellion, in all your hatred of me at times, in all your, you know, thinking I'm just the worst person, know that there's nobody else on this earth that's going to have the interest
Your best interest.
Yeah.
like I do.
Yes.
Nobody else
Very
on
true.
this earth. And
Yes.
I think this is just what this is saying, that
Right.
God has our best interest.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we are like teenagers.
And just like teenagers, hungry teenagers, they
Yeah.
start murmuring about not having food.
Not having food.
Where's the
And then-
snacks?
You're not
right?
hungry.
Where's the-
After school snack, got to be there, Mom. Where is it? So God provides one, right? And so we get into the story of the manna.
Yes.
And what page are you on? 180?
Oh, did I?
It's at 179.
179?
Yeah.
Okay.
On the end, I will rain bread from heaven for you.
Yeah.
And of course, then they get the directions about, you know, getting just enough for the day and
Yeah.
the measurement of how much for each person. And yet, there are still people trying to store it, even though it said, you know,
It would
just
not-
for that day. And then on Sabbath, they didn't take enough for that day. And then, you know, it's like wayward.
Yes.
Why aren't you listening? Like, oh man, Moses, he had a hard job. Because I'd be tempted to be knocking some heads and be like,
Yeah.
you know what, didn't I tell you? Only for today.
One thing that's pivotal to notice here is also, but he gives these specific instructions about the Sabbath. And just want to point out, this is
Yeah.
also before Mount Sinai, before it's audibly given or written.
Right.
You know, so
Yeah.
again, I hate to keep sounding like a repeat button, but this concept of Sabbath we see kind of like a thread kind of interwoven throughout
Yes.
all the whole narrative of the Bible, not just at a certain point forward, but throughout from
Right.
the beginning to the end.
And we know they had a knowledge of it even in Egypt, because Pharaoh goes, are you wanting to let these people have a Sabbath?
Right.
When Moses comes in to say, let my people go, you know, what God told him to say. He's like, I'm going to make them work even harder. I'm going to take away even a chance to have a Sabbath.
Yeah.
So, you know, they had a knowledge of it just to show that it was not at Sinai that this knowledge came to be.
Was there from creation?
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely.
It didn't change.
I like how God, you know, when I was a kid, I always wanted snacks, but I wanted the sweet snacks. But he gives them one that tastes like honey.
I know, because he's a good God.
Yeah,
They call it the angel's food, right?
yeah,
They did.
Yeah.
absolutely.
And you would bake it and it'd be angel's food cake. No?
Oh, that's a good
That's
one.
where
Yeah.
that came from.
Yes. That's why it's so good. Yeah. I also was thinking about how it talked about those that went out to get so much manna for, you know, each person. It said that those that gathered much and those that gathered little
Little.
had enough.
Yeah.
It was always
Like it's
enough.
evened up.
Yeah.
God's grace and everything, right? Yeah.
So they did not have a lack.
Nope.
But like Mike brought up, now this is like, okay, you guys weren't able to keep my Sabbath in Egypt, and I understand.
Yeah.
But now it talks about in 180 that God requires that his holy day be as sacredly observed now as in the time of Israel.
Yeah.
It's like we're bringing it back.
Yeah. And then it gets to where not only were they hungry, then they get thirsty.
Oh, but wait, real quick before you
Yeah,
move
sure.
on to that.
Sure.
Because the sentence right under it, just to reiterate the whole Sabbath thing, it says, the command given to the Hebrews should be regarded by all Christians as an injunction from Jehovah to them. The day before the Sabbath should be made a day of preparation, that everything may be in readiness for its sacred hours. It's serious, you know,
Yeah.
like he seriously wants to have that time.
And then he asks also, how long refuse ye to keep my commandments and laws?
Right.
Yeah.
And then, you know, I appreciated, too, that it covered the fact of, you know, what is good and what isn't good. to do with that time, because they needed to know that as well.
Right.
And so I did like how it covered, work of mercy.
Right.
Yes.
And I appreciated that it covered that. But you wanted to move on to water?
Oh, I was just saying that then the next murmuring
no water
is
again.
no water. The water machine's broke. It's like the McFlurry machine at McDonald's is broke. Can you
Never worked.
Never works. Can you please do something about
Yeah.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did appreciate too, on 181 it talked about every week there was during their long sojourn in the wilderness, the Israelites witnessed a threefold miracle every week.
Yes, they did.
Every week. A double quantity of manna fell on the 6th day and none on the 7th, It kept over for the Sabbath.
Right.
There was a threefold,
And then there was measuring enough for everybody.
and there was enough
Yes.
for everybody. So every week they continually got to see that miracle.
But I find that sometimes it's like we forget. Things kind of get stale. We forget about it. So at first it's whoa.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
Oh.
after a couple weeks,
Yeah.
it's not sweet enough or
Yeah.
it's not that good.
I listened to a sermon once of this Adventist pastor, and it was really good at talking about this. At first like, woo, like, it's manna, this is awesome. And then after like a month, they're like, woo. And then it gets to be about 4 months, and they're like, and then about 6 months later, they're like, But and I thought about this in the Christian walk. When we come to Jesus, we're like,
First,
woo.
you're on fire.
Yeah, you're
We
like,
want to
Yeah.
tell everybody about
Yeah.
it.
yes. But
Yeah.
then after a while, sadly, we're like, you're not even reading anymore.
Yeah.
You're not wanting to feed on it. You'd rather have something, the food of Egypt, and I thought that was really,
This was done for 40
40
years.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
Same thing. You
I
ate
just
the
wonder-
same thing for 40 years.
It's like, do you ever watch Forrest Gump? Where you're like, how many
Yeah, the
how many
shrimp.
dishes of shrimp can you make? How many
Yeah.
dishes of manna can you make?
Oh,
Baked
wow.
manna, fried manna.
you know that they got
Yeah.
creative.
Oh, they
Yeah.
had to.
Yeah.
But I know, sorry to keep the pedal on the foot on
Oh,
the
yeah.
pedal. Now we got to fast forward before I still want to touch on something. The Amalekites.
Okay.
And then there's this group. Now, I'm paraphrasing here, but these were a group of, I don't know how to say it, but they're just a group of bad people. I mean, they had it in their hearts that they wanted to defy God and wipe out the Israelites.
Right, you're on page 183, right?
Yes, the word
Okay.
talks about the Amalekites. They were not ignorant of God's character or of his sovereignty,
Right.
but instead, fearing before him, they had set themselves to defy his power. And so what do? They come back and attack the people that are weak and tiresome at
In
the
the
very
back.
in the back, right? It's
Yeah.
like cheap shot, pretty much.
Uh-huh.
Right? I don't know how to say it. It's a cheap shot.
Yeah.
And it shows you God did not take lightly to that.
Oh, absolutely not.
No. Yeah, it's
You touched my children.
Right. It's just. But these people, they knew, they heard, they even mocked what he did to Egypt. They're like, I mean, he just basically brought a nation to their knees, and they're making fun of that.
And they're like, it would never happen to us. We would have defeated it. And you go, wow, you
Yeah.
guys are crazy.
And they knew about God. They knew everything about him. It wasn't like they were,
Ignorant.
ignorant of him.
Yeah.
That was a bold.
They were bold.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but I think it's safe to say we talked about this phrase, their cup of iniquity had run full here, and God said it's time that it says here, the Amalekites fell upon the wearied and defenseless ranks of Israel. They sealed their nations. They sealed their own doom, basically,
By that
act.
Right, because God allowed him to speak all the bold things they were saying, but when it came to that, he was like, whoop,
Yeah.
that's it.
And then also skimming through, we see Jethro giving wise counsel to Moses about delegation and how to help govern. And it says here really quickly that this counsel was accepted, and it not only brought relief to Moses, but resulted in establishing more perfect order among the people.
Right.
So God is a God of order. We need not forget that.
That same counsel, we use it today.
Yes.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
We do.
Very true.
I did say one quick thing on the manna. One last thing.
Go ahead.
Back on 81, it says, the manna fallen from heaven for the sustenance of Israel was a type of him who came from God to give life to the world. Said Jesus, I am the bread of life. I just wanted to make that connection with the manna. Now we can move on.
No, very good points. Very good points.
And even us, we will get to eat it. It's, Revelation 2:17, it says, that to him that overcometh will I give to eat of the hidden manna. You go, wow.
Yeah.
Well, the next chapter, chapter 27, now we get to Mount Sinai, right? Now this is quite the eventful chapter too. It says here, ye have seen what I have did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, and brought you unto myself. Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and of holy nation. Again, this constant theme of he's trying to draw them back closer to himself, right?
And I love that, but just prior to this, they've been going through this desert, this barren land, these rocky hills and all these things, and they get to this little place where it opens up and they see it.
Yeah.
And I just thought, imagery-wise, I was like, that's so cool.
Yeah.
Because here they are, they're now seeing the mountain kind of parts and they see through and then they're there.
Yeah. And I like how God here is like, he's trying to make this a grand
Yes.
manifestation of himself. I don't know if, I never like when Hollywood tries to make movies about Bible themes, but if they tried, how would they animate what he does up on the cloud? When he comes upon the cloud and engulfs the whole cloud with, or the whole mountain with the cloud, and the lightnings and the thunderings and the fires and everything. I mean, it's a grand scene for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, and you talked about the fact that, are you on 185 on the first paragraph?
Am I too far ahead? I am probably about...
Well, I was just going to say, on the very first page of chapter 27, where he talked, I love that he said, it's Genesis 19, 4-6, but he says, ye have seen what I did unto the Egyptians, and how I bare you on eagle's wings, like you're talking about, and brought you unto myself. The whole point was to bring, he wanted them.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that was, it wasn't just so they could get the Ten Commandments, like, I wanted you.
Yeah.
I want a relationship.
Yeah.
I think so. Stan made a very important point today in his sermon when he said, and I'm just paraphrasing how I remembered it or how it impacted me, but he said, some people grow up in the church and they're just doing, by route. But that relationship is what's important. And, sometimes when I even talk to my kids, and because, different people will observe the Sabbath in different ways, and they're just different things. And I usually tell them, I said, one of the most important thing is the relationship. You have to have a relationship with him. And if you don't have a relationship with someone, as I've said before, you cannot correct them. You cannot do anything.
Yeah.
You cannot counsel them, or they're not going to even turn to you for counsel if you don't have a relationship, because I'm not going to go to a stranger and ask for advice or counsel. I'm going to go to someone I have a relationship with, someone I trust.
Right.
So the relationship is the important thing, I think, here. And that's always what he has wanted with us.
Yeah.
Personal
Absolutely.
relationship.
Absolutely.
Personal relationship.
He wants to give them an experience. And this is what's happening. He's wanting them to have this experience.
And you're right. And part of that experience is understanding me, meaning Moses gave them instructions. We need to, nation of Israel, when you're coming before God, he is a serious God. You need to purify yourselves. He tried to also get them a right understanding of what sin, of how God viewed sin.
Right, but even like beyond mind-blowing to me in that verse in Genesis is the fact that he's even giving them a choice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? In this relationship sense, he's now going to lay out the conditional or the relation. He says, now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. He's saying, look, this is what I want in our relationship, but you do have a choice. And that's just, to me, it's like, wow, you led these people all the way out here. And he's like, I love you so much. I'm bringing you unto myself, but it's okay
If you choose not to.
If you choose not to.
After all I've done for you. And humans will be like, after all I've done for you.
Right, right.
We'd be like, come on, straighten up.
Right,
But
absolutely.
then he gives that choice.
Yeah. So I was like, man. But of course, they say, all that the Lord has spoken,
Yeah,
we
we
will
will
do. And this is just getting to Sinai
Yeah.
at the beginning.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's I need to understand that context too.
Yeah, and then it goes basically to the Decalogue, right? I mean,
The commandments.
there's quite a bit there. There's like 3 days getting ready. There's like quite a bit. It's this
And
one.
then Moses had to further
days of
into he had to do 6
Yeah.
days of preparation, and then he
Yeah.
spent 40
Yeah.
days up there.
Right.
That's something new I learned was that Joshua was with him during those 6 days.
6 days, but he never went
But he
with
never
him
went with
All the
him
way.
all the way up.
up.
He just
Yeah.
hung out.
Yeah, he just hung out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and then they said they ate manna and they drank from the brook during that 6 days of preparation. But then when Joshua was out there, he was still eating, and Moses was fasting
Yes.
when he went up there. And you're like, 40 days of not eating, but I guess just being in God's presence was probably enough to sustain him,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
food wasn't important. It's
Right.
just like Christmas morning for kids, they don't care about breakfast, they care about the prize and the presents and stuff. And I could just imagine Moses just being in that same excitement and just want to be there with him, commune with him, talk to him, learn from him, all that good stuff. That food wasn't even important anymore.
Man, have you ever, when you're first in love with your partner, right?
Uh-huh.
You first fall in love and you're like, I don't need to sleep. I don't need to eat. I just want to look at your face. I mean, you know how it
You
is.
spend hours on the phone
Yeah.
with your partner.
It's like 24 hours later, and I'm like, I don't even need to go to the bathroom. Like, let's just be together. So I'm guessing that's how it was for Moses. Like,
Fall asleep with the phone right there.
Oh yeah, I've fallen asleep a lot of times with the phone.
Yeah.
so this is real.
And then,
And then the commandments, huh?
do you want to touch on each one real quick, see if anything stands out, or do you want to? Would y'all like to?
Well, before they were even given, there was, these days were intervening days. All were to occupy the time in solemn preparation
Yes,
for
the
the
preparation.
appearing of God. Now, in same to modern day, there's going to be another appearing of God. Jesus is going to come again. It should be a solemn preparation for that event. And I thought it was really fascinating and important to the fact that it said their person and their clothing must be free from impurity. And as Moses should point out their sins, they were to devote themselves to humiliation, fasting, and prayer, that their hearts may be cleansed from iniquity. And I was like, wow, this is really, really a solemn moment
Yeah.
before he has his grand entrance.
Yeah, I mean, God made rules. Like, if anybody comes near the base of this, they're going to die immediately. I mean, in other words, take me seriously. I'm here. I brought you here for a reason. I'm
Yes.
here to manifest myself to you. It's a very good point.
Yeah, and there was silence. And then it goes just like
Yeah.
silence. And I was thinking about that. And then it says, and then the voice of God was heard, speaking out of the thick darkness, and enshrouded him. As he stood upon the mount, surrounded by a retinue of angels, the Lord made known his law. And then it talked about, prior to that, a trumpet.
Yeah.
There was a trumpet, prior to that silence, there was a trumpet that went forth. I wonder what that must have sounded like. I mean, it made the people tremble.
I bet.
No, I hadn't read
hear
this.
it.
I hadn't read this chapter of Exodus in a while, but I'll admit to it. Like, I had forgotten that he audibly spoke the commandments before he wrote them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After not reading it for a while, I just always wrote them and handed them down, and that was it.
The tablets of stones are always kind of,
Right. It's
in
in
the
the movies.
movies.
and-
Yes.
It's everywhere. We have pictures of them in our
Yes.
homes and everything. But I think this whole preparation in terms of, for God is important. In terms of, how we present ourselves in the sanctuary. I mean, I remember if you enter a church like in Jamaica, the first thing you're going to see on the wall or somewhere, it's going to say, reverence my sanctuary. And as kids, you dare not run in that church.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah.
You dare not run in there. You don't play on the pulpit. You don't do stuff like that. And, some people might see it as being legalistic or being harsh or, whatever, but I think it presents a certain amount of reverence.
Yes.
If you go to a gospel concert or a rock concert and it's not time for you to be singing with the band, you stay quiet, right? So why can't we do the same thing in reverence in our Creator? Who
Yeah.
gives us everything.
Absolutely.
I mean, we should show the same amount of respect or even more.
Right.
And that's just my personal opinion.
Oh,
I'll get
no,
off my soapbox now.
I'm fully with you, because
No,
this
that's
is what's
correct.
about to happen, right? God, let's get ready, prepare. He shows up. There is a trumpet sound. You ever try to get your children's attention or something like that? It's like a foghorn's going off. Everybody's attention's being given, and then it goes poof, silence. It's a reverent moment, like you're
Yes.
talking about.
Yes.
They were to approach him with reverence.
Reverence. Yes.
Yes. And it talked about, Mikey, I didn't know if you were going to, I know you're going to move on, but it said the law was not spoken at this time exclusively for the benefit of the Hebrews. God honored them by making them the guardians and keepers of his law, but it was to be held as a sacred trust for the whole world.
For the whole world, right? They were just
Yeah.
first it was handed down to,
Yes.
at least the written form of it. But
And
you're
there
right.
it is,
This
the
whole,
written
the whole
form.
time, this isn't something that God just conjured up. These laws that have always been, they'd always been passed down verbally. We forget that. And just now he decides, let's just write them down.
Write 'em. There's this Chinese proverb that says, the weakest ink is stronger than the greatest mind. So stuff that's written, it's there.
Yeah.
It can be passed down. Because have you ever played the story where you whisper a phrase and by the end
Oh,
of the line
telephone.
it is something
Yeah.
totally different?
Oh, yeah.
We couldn't have any of this happening with God's laws. They had
No.
to be
Yes.
how he says them, exactly how he wants them. And I think that was one of the purposes of having them written.
Absolutely. Me and Mike were having a conversation in the car talking about the old and new covenants.
Yes.
Talking about the old covenant is everything you say we will do, because in them, they're going to try to write that law in their heart. And God says, no, I will write it in your heart, because you can't write it yourself. I'm the one that writes it. And I was like, I told Mike, I was like, oh, that's what it means. I was like, for a long time, he said, I will write it upon your heart. And I thought, because it's a contract. You can't sign that contract. It's my contract to sign on you. And I thought, perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you're right. He is the one that has to write it, not us.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be, changed or, something else, putting somewhere else, It's written. It's written in stone, man.
Yes.
That's it,
Yeah.
Do you want to touch a little bit on each one, or should we? We
Because it's
have
our
to-
last chapter, so
We might
yeah.
have to. We might have to bring protocol and go a little bit over this time.
Yeah, because, there's like thou shalt not take the Lord's name in vain.
Well, I like
so
really
many
quickly.
times. Well, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah,
wanna go
but
in
just go
order?
ahead.
Yeah, well, just even before going over it, I like how he summarizes in, thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy strength, and with all thy mind, and within thyself, thy neighbor as thyself. Kind of summarizing
The
what the
whole-
Decalogue's all about, right? Right up front. That's kind of what we're doing here. Well, not the chapter, I should say, is doing that.
I love how it says in the Ten Commandments, these principles.
Yeah.
These principles are carried out in
In
detail
detail.
and made applicable to the conditions and circumstances of man, because it goes beyond just,
Yeah.
it's not just this one phrase. It actually encompasses many things, like Jesus will go into.
Right, so real quickly, thou shalt have no other gods. The one that stood out to me is that paragraph right behind it. It says, Jehovah, the eternal, self-existent, uncreated one, himself, the source and sustainer of all, is alone entitled to supreme reverence and worship. Man is forbidden to give any other object the first place in his affections or his service. Whatever we cherish that tends to lessen our love for God or to interfere with the service due him, is of that do we make a God. That kind of just put it out there.
Yeah. Next.
Let's see, the second. Thou shalt make no other graven image. Do you want to read the whole thing? Or any likeness of any kind that is in the heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is the water under the earth. Thou shalt not bow down thyself to them nor serve them. Of course, the one that stood out to me is the attempt to represent the Eternal One by material objects would lower man's conception of God.
Yeah.
The mind turned away from the infinite perfection of Jehovah would be attracted to the creature rather than to the Creator, and his conceptions of God were lowered. And as his conceptions of God were lowered, so would man become degraded.
Yeah.
I mean, it clearly said, but God has declared such worship to be sin.
Yeah,
It is a sin.
yeah. And I think in other parts of Spirit Prophecy says God had such foresight that he knew idolatry would lead to human sacrifice as well. And we see that with the other surrounding heathen nations around Israel.
That would be like the end result.
Yeah,
the
that would be the end
pinnacle
result.
moment of
Yeah.
like where it led to.
Of what idolatry would lead
Yeah.
to.
But you know, I think in our hearts we're created to serve God. There is a place in us for God. And I think those people who don't believe in God, then they use those images. That's their replacement, because there's that yearning, there is that
Yeah.
need. And if you don't find the true God, you're going to try and find a substitute.
Right.
Very
know?
true.
And I still don't see how you can carve something that you know you carve it, okay? You knew you carved this thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How are you going to think it has powers?
Yeah.
How?
Because you give it.
You give it to it. Yeah.
You know-
That's just.
It just baffles me all the time.
You're
But
right.
I do believe that we're created in such a way that that supreme being, who is God,
Yes.
we need him. There's a need for us. We're created for worship.
You're right.
And if we don't find the true God, we're going to find something else.
That's
Yeah.
so true. Something will
That's
fill the
true.
void,
You're right.
right?
Yes.
And we
Yeah.
spoke about
Yeah.
today in Sabbath School this morning how sinister is Satan's plan. That if I can get them to worship something else, in other words, get them to not believe God, he knows that man is inclined to worship something.
Yes.
That's where I plug myself in. You know, in other words, it's
Yeah.
part of his plan that
Yes.
if I can get them not to worship the right God,
Yeah.
then by
Anything
default,
else is me.
Yep.
it's me. Right.
Anything else is me.
Yep.
Right. And you know, it goes on to be the fact that it doesn't have to be even something carved. Like, you know, anything
Yeah.
that takes
Yeah.
the place before God, whether it be
Sports heroes, clothing, money,
Brady.
possessions.
Yeah, anything.
Tom Brady.
Exactly. anything, right?
1-7.
Anything.
Our time,
He
our
has
talents,
1-7.
He has
or
1-7.
whatever. Yeah.
But
But Bert's right. The next one is
Something that you hear every day, and it just makes me mad.
yeah.
to take the
And,
Lord's
yeah,
name in vain.
take and swearing and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of people start doing it without even noticing. Like, it's like, no. Like, I know my children, I've had to stop them from saying
Yeah, you
certain
have to,
phrases.
yes.
Yeah, because yeah,
For
it's
some,
just,
Remind them.
for some reason, it's super easy for
yeah, it is.
people to pick that one up.
Yeah. And but that one's something that kind of goes in today's society kind of under the radar
Sure.
because a lot of people do it. And
And it just becomes accepted.
yeah,
You know, the
Yeah.
more it's done, then it doesn't seem as harsh on the ears anymore. And then eventually it just kind of
Right.
becomes a norm.
There was
Yeah.
there was a movie that I saw that just like impacted me for the rest of my life, and it was like a time machine kind of movie, and this guy was from like the 1800s, and he went into the time machine. It was a low budget, but it was awesome. And
Very
I
low
think,
budget.
I think I know what you're talking
and so
yeah.
he came to modern day, and he found a church, and they're like, they had a youth, like a youth kind of group type thing, and they're like, we're gonna go see a movie. It's, you know, if you want to join us. And he goes to the movie theater. He's never been before, and blah, blah, blah. He goes into the movie theater, and you just see seconds later him busting through the doors and screaming to the people that are working at the movie theater to stop that movie. You know, he's pleading with them. He's like crying and screaming, please stop that movie, because they're taking the Lord's name in vain. And I go, wow. And none of the other Christians came out and made a big deal about it. You see how impactful that was? It
Yep.
impacted me so much because I thought, that's so true. And it talked about here, but it forbids to use the name of God in a light or careless manner without regard to its awful significance. And
Right.
so I feel you on that one.
And the fourth is the Sabbath Commandment. It's
And like Maria said, it is not a new commandment. It was established at creation.
right. Yeah.
That creation.
And it goes on to talk about it being the seal, being the seal of God. You know, that it's the name, the title of the lawgiver, the authority of the law who's given it, and thus it contains the seal of God affixed to his law as evidence of its authenticity and binding force.
Right. And it starts with the word remember, right?
Remember.
Sure.
It's a sign to our allegiance to him.
Absolutely.
It also says, to keep the Sabbath holy, we should not even allow our minds to dwell upon the things of a worldly character. And the commandment includes all within our gates, too. We think about just acts, but also our minds. We forget about that aspect, too.
Yes. I think that's even more needs to be guarded than, because, the things start in the mind that, your actions come first in the mind. So a lot of times people think, oh, if I just don't do that and that, and it's like, well, but then you're thinking about it the whole day. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that being one of the first hurdles I had to jump over when we first became Adventist is, no football on Saturday.
Right.
Yeah, can't watch it.
Right.
Yeah.
That was a struggle, but we got over it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And that's one of the kind of the reasons too. So with this whole COVID thing, we had stopped coming to church and stuff. And with kids, they want to do different things. And I find that I'm like, you know what? We're going back to church. Because at least that is a couple hours.
Yes.
Okay? And I know you're looking at it in time frame, but when you have children,
Yeah.
you take it little at a time. And I'm like, you know what? By the time we wake up, we get dressed, we come to church, we worship. That's a good half of the day there by the
Yes.
time, And then by the evening, you go home, you eat. We'll encourage a nap, and we'll try to maybe do some Bible games or something to get through. Because if you don't occupy them, they're going to find
Oh,
something
yeah.
to occupy themselves.
Oh, yeah.
You're right.
And what I have found is that, if you are wishy-washy about it and you're like, okay, this one time we're going to go to a game on Sabbath.
Yeah.
And that kid's going to look at you and be
Oh,
like,
yeah.
we went last week. Why can't we go this week
That's
again?
right.
They're quick to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. They are quick to remind you.
Oh, yeah.
So you just have to stay the course and find stuff to occupy them and get them through it. Because if you allow them to their own vices, it ain't going to work.
You're absolutely right. A day coming to church on Sabbath is a good day, even if it's one where they drop the deviled eggs in the morning. You remember that? Do you remember that?
Yes, I do too.
Even if those types of Sabbath, it's still a better Sabbath than no Sabbath.
Yes.
Well, Maverick, this is where I come in, buddy, and tell you that we're going to have to figure something out real
What,
fast.
you want to go quickly?
Yeah,
we're
we're getting some
at-
looks over here. Thanks, Goose.
It's honor thy father.
I got you, buddy.
Yeah,
Honor thy brother.
what I took about from that one, guys, is that's kind of one with promise, right? Really quickly.
Yes.
I think I lost my spot here, guys. Let me see. No,
188.
there we go. Well, somebody help me out here.
Honor.
Okay, yeah. That what came to me is that it kind of says it's the first commandment with promise,
Promise,
right? And one thing is other than my mother and father, we're like, well, what does that really mean? It's like not only as a kid, but also into our adults.
Yeah.
We might not be in their household where mom tells me to go cut the grass, I have to go cut the grass, but it does say to care for them as they get into their
Older.
elder years.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
To me, when I read that too, taking it off of my earthly parents, but also the relationship I have with our Father.
Yeah.
I mean, everything it talked about, the fifth commandment requires children. I think I'm a child of God. It says not only to yield respect, submission, and obedience to their parents, but also to give them love and tenderness and to lighten their cares, to guard their reputation, and to secure the comfort them in old age. And I thought that was so a double blessing almost. If like a relational between me and my Heavenly Father and me and my earthly father
Yeah.
and mother.
All I'm saying is like when we spank them and they're like, why are you spanking me? You say, hey, back in the day, it was grounds for death. So
Oh wow, Mike!
take it easy.
Oh, when they're like disrespectful or what?
No, we're like, why are you spanking me? He's like, well, do you want that or death? Yeah.
I'll remember that.
Just kidding. These are our
And the next one's thou shalt not kill,
Yeah.
Mike.
But I like here how that's not just talking about just the act, but also acts of injustice too.
Yeah. Or causes to wish them harm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then of course adultery, thou shalt not commit adultery.
That's in your mind, nowhere else.
Right. Thou shalt not steal. That's not just stealing, not just property, but also you could be stealing wages from somebody. In other words, it kind of keeps.
Being
I like
unfair.
how it keeps employers straight, right?
That's true.
And I hate to say, not to get political, but you almost seem like God, as he's giving these, you see the points behind him. It's almost like he was for social justice, you could say, not to get political, but he was for the right doing, what was right.
Oh, yeah.
My intent was not to throw that out there for political reasons or anything, but just to show that God had a reason for everything behind, when he's throwing these out there, there's a reason for it.
But if you look at these commandments, that's our society is based on these.
Yeah.
That's very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
I can't go kill, I can't go steal, I'll go to jail.
But like in them, I love how it's built in, like checks and balances are built
Yeah.
in there. It's for the employer doesn't cheat the employee, for the employee to be good to his employer.
Yes.
It's checks and balances built in.
Right. And thou shalt not bear false witness
Right.
against thy neighbor.
I know we're skimming here real quick
Yeah.
and then at the end, I like how number 10, I never looked at it that way, the 10th commandment for coveting. The 10th commandment strikes at the very root of all sins, prohibiting selfish desire from which springs the sinful act. He who is in obedience to God's law refrains from indulging even a sinful desire for that which belongs to another will not be guilty of an act of wrong toward his fellow creatures. So yeah. And then also real quick, so we got through the 10 commandments, and there's also these other laws that he gave to Moses.
Oh man, we have
Yes.
so much
I know.
more. This is terrible.
And that's kind of where it gets. That's kind of where it gets good because it's talking about slavery and
Yes.
it gets so
Yeah.
much good stuff. But we're kind of out of time here.
Sorry.
I really appreciate that. Just on we have to go because everybody's staring.
Yeah.
But when it talked about the whole thing about the slavery and the service and man stealing and things like that, the holding of slaves not of Israelitish birth was permitted, but their life and person were strictly guarded. I mean, all of these things when we're going to go on and you're going to talk about. God also has the best interest of people that are not part of Israel as well.
Right.
Yes.
He talks about the widows and the orphans. How he made it.
Should be treated.
He made it a big stress to care for them. That it'd be sin if we didn't take care of the needy, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
And then also he goes into usury. I mean, God knew it is a sin if you ask for like a high interest from somebody who has no means of even paying it.
Yeah.
That's true.
It's like he keeps us in check from ourselves because he knew left to our own devices, I'm going to take advantage of Bert or Callie or Marina.
Right.
He puts these checks and balances in there.
And here, before Sinai, when they get to Sinai, they said, that you said we will
We'll
do.
do.
And here it ends with it on page 191, with all of this being recited and everything. They say, again, the people answered with one accord, all that the Lord hath said we will do and be obedient. So, because just prior to that, it said, thus the conditions of the covenant were solemnly repeated. Given it, maybe we're just going to tell you again, kind of thing. And all were at liberty to choose whether or not they would comply with them. They had at the first promised to obey the voice of God, but they had since heard his law and proclaimed, and its principles had been particularized, that they might know how much this covenant involved.
Yeah.
So twice now he's. I thought that was really fascinating because at first he gave him a chance and they said, okay, everything you say we'll do
it.
And now they're like even more. They're like
Now that they hear the terms, the
Yeah.
full terms, it's all
Yeah.
up. It's on the table.
that's it. Yes.
And I like how it also goes, he gives Moses the details of the sanctuary while he's up there too.
Yeah.
Just want to point that out real quickly. But you're right. It's just, you know what? I'm not going to apologize for going over it. It's not,
Not
our
at
fault.
all.
There's just
And we
so
didn't
much
even get to
content.
go through most of it.
There's just
The
so
end
much
of it.
good content.
So this chapter is a good one.
It is.
Nice.
It's just a lot.
This is where God sends Jesus too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was him that was speaking up there with Moses.
Well, yeah. On 191, he says the message was given them from Jehovah. Behold, I send an angel before thee
Yeah.
to keep thee in the way and bring thee into the place which I have prepared. And there, I got to stop. Okay.
I know. The one thing that you guys can comment on, and I really thought was really fascinating as well, is when for 6 days the cloud covered. When Moses was up there for 6 days, nothing happened.
Right.
For 6 days, the cloud covered the mountain as a token of God's special presence. Yes, there was no revelation of himself or communication of his will. This is almost like a Noah moment.
Yeah.
7 days inside the ark, and here you have 6 days where he's going to be waiting.
And that was Moses and Joshua waiting.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. It was. I think it says it was a test of patience of Moses. That moment was. That was
Yeah.
before the 40 days, before he's called up
Before
higher
winter for the 40
Yeah.
days. Mhm.
Yeah.
Just let them stock up.
Yeah. Get all the calories you can.
Yeah.
So should we end with just quickly closing thoughts on the 3 chapters? Anything that stood out to you? Goose.
Goose.
You're on.
Just there was too much to just comment on one thing, other than
Anything that stood out to you that you just want to?
just everything did. Sorry.
Yeah.
There was not one specific thing that I could just point out. It was just this whole last chapter was very impactful, and
Yeah. If anything stood out to me, I guess it would be again every chapter was so much we didn't even get to cover it all, but
Yeah.
just God's loving mercy towards the nation of Israel. How He really was just wooing them to Himself, and the way He's manifesting Himself to them. It just shows how loving God we have, and long-suffering, and all these great qualities of Himself.
Yes.
How could you not just be in awe of Him?
You know, they say, well, from slavery to salvation. You know, it says, from a race of slaves, the Israelites had been exalted above all peoples to be the peculiar treasure of the King of Kings. Can you imagine that? I mean, I'll put a little plug in here, Black History Month and everything, and slavery and all of this, and here,
Yeah.
there's hope for us all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Amen.
Absolutely. I think like every single one of you was a build-up to how wonderful God is. There's not even words for, Goose over here is like, what can I say?
Yeah.
There's not words. And then Mike's talking about the fact of how good of a God He is, that He brought us out. And then here is Maria talking about the fact that He took us from slaves to priests, to royalty. And the fact is, it says He purposed through them to preserve among men the knowledge of Himself. What a high calling to get to know Him and to have a purpose, and that we can also tell others of the wonderful God we serve.
Amen.
So Mike, do you want to finish with a prayer?
We prayed coming in. We usually don't pray exiting, so with that, we'll leave it. Thank y'all for joining. We appreciate your time.
Because
Any
we're so
comments?
over.
We're so over. We're so in trouble. You might not see us again.
I know.
Thank you. Till next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.